Megan K's grandma, known as Mawmaw, makes some of the best buttermilk biscuits I've ever had in my life. It's been a while since we've been able to get down to Mississippi, and I had a really big craving for them, so I made them last week and just immediately was reminded of how good they are. They're super buttery, nice and tender, but they're a little bit crispier than most biscuits are, I'd say. There's a really nice crunch on the bottom and the top that I think defines these biscuits. If you've never had a biscuit like this, I think it's absolutely worth trying. And what goes better with biscuits than some really, really nice sausage gravy? I can't wait. Let me show you how to make it. To really put this over the top, I'm gonna start by making my own breakfast sausage. It sounds really complicated, but it's as simple as mixing a bunch of ingredients with ground pork. Place about a pound of ground pork into a bowl, and then add 3.5 grams of salt, about 1 gram of pepper, 1 gram of poultry seasoning. If you don't have this, it's got sage, thyme, and onion powder, which are things that I would add to a sausage normally, so just go with those ingredients. 1 gram of sugar. This could be white or brown sugar. I don't have brown sugar, it'd probably be better that way. A little bit of rubbed sage, which is basically just ground sage. 0.5 grams of red pepper. The nice thing about this sausage is it's going into a gravy, so we're gonna be able to adjust the seasoning with salt and pepper later, but if you're really, really worried about the seasoning now, you can go ahead and cook off a little piece and then try it. You can do this in the microwave or just in a pan. There are also tons of just good pre-made breakfast sausages. You can totally just use those. There's no one telling you you have to make your own. I just think it's really easy and something that's worth knowing how to do. Use your hands to mix this together until you start to see the fat start to strand and create these like little strings. The whole mixture is gonna become a lot more sticky and tacky, and then that is pretty much your breakfast sausage. That's how the sausage gets made, people. Boo. I'm gonna hand it over to Mawmaw herself to talk through the process of the biscuits. It's an old school process that I think should be preserved.
There again, we're using self-rising flour, and it's gonna be plenty of that.
Yeah, so how much precisely was that?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think that'll be enough for us. I use Crisco shortening. Okay. Cameron, I don't know how to tell you how much that is.
No, don't. You're okay.
I use a soup spoon, and I get for that much, for a cup and a half of flour, I'm going to use a big scoop and a half a scoop.
Big scoop and a little scoop.
And you can make them with regular milk or buttermilk. I like the buttermilk because it makes them flaky. Just a little at a time.
Do you have a texture that you're looking for?
Well, yeah, I'll know it when I see it. We just add a little milk at a time till you get it just the right, because you're going to want to handle it with your hands. Well, it's going to take every bit of, almost a cup of milk. I'd say 3/4 of a cup. All right, that's just about the consistency you want it, because you're going to need it now. You're going to need it with your...
So that's the texture you want it?
Yeah, for right now. All right. Just dump that out. All right, you're going to flour your hands good. And then you're just going to gently work that. You don't want to get too much flour in it because you want it to be nice and tender. You want them to be, you don't want them to be all tough. Now I don't use a rolling pin and roll mine out, but most people do.
So that's the amount of working that you're doing.
Just what you do. Just what you have to get them shaped. You got your biscuits in a tube. You're just going to pinch them off just like that. And there you go. I always thought rolling them with a rolling pin and cutting them with a cutter was just too much trouble. They gonna rise, so you want to pat them down.
I did try to do my best to approximate the actual measurements from what Mawmaw was telling me and what I could see, but it's pretty tough, and you're gonna see that even in my own measurements, where depending on the day I have to add more flour or more buttermilk, and that's kind of just how it goes. Okay, so my measurements came out to about 220 grams of self-rising flour mixed with a pinch of salt. To that, I'm gonna cut in 60 grams of lard. Mawmaw uses Crisco, but we never keep shortening around, and I almost always have lard on hand for tortillas. From there, I add about 150 to 160 grams of buttermilk, and then mix it with the fork and then my hands. Here's where you'll see where Mawmaw and I both do the same thing, which is adjust it based on texture. If it's feeling too wet, add a little bit more self-rising flour. If it's a little bit too dry, add a little bit more buttermilk. This process is how you get really used to what the biscuits are supposed to feel like, and you're gonna see they turn out good pretty much no matter what. As long as you're in this ballpark of a biscuit that can be shaped and molded with your hands, you're gonna be solid. You don't want them super tough and really hard, so don't overmix these. This is basically just for them to barely come together. You can see there's still like flour and buttermilk sticking to the sides of the bowl. Now for forming, I love that Mawmaw does this for actual portioning. What she does is just tears off pieces and forms them into little patties basically in her hands. There's no rolling, there's no pouring this out onto a board and then getting it like flat and then cutting them out. No, it's literally just you take a handful, you pat it down, and then you place it on a tray. Makes it really, really easy, but you can see what I sort of do is kind of massage them into these weird shapes. That way you get extra fluff and extra texture on mine. I like it a little bit fluffier than Mawmaw makes it for her family. That's just something I do. I went ahead and measured them and weighed them. 80 grams is about right for each one. Now these biscuits are gonna head into a 400-degree oven until they're cooked, and that takes about 22 to 27, 28 minutes or so, depending on how hot your oven is. You do want the bottom to get a really, really nice crisp on it. I think that is so important for these Mawmaw style biscuits. While these are in the oven, we're gonna turn to our sausage gravy. This is gonna be creamy, luscious, and perfect to coat our biscuits in. Grab a cast iron, mostly just because it feels right for biscuits and gravy, and place it over medium-high heat. I'm gonna not add any butter because the pork that I've been using is pretty fatty, about 25% fat. If your pork is less fatty, you're gonna wanna add a small knob of butter here. I just add my sausage to the hot, dry pan and then begin breaking these pieces up. You're gonna wanna break them up constantly so you have a good mix of small and large pieces, but once they're sort of broken up, just let them sit, like don't touch them, just let them sit on that first side until you start to see this really deep, crispy, dark brown. Smaller pieces are gonna brown more deeply and the larger pieces are gonna stay a little bit more moist. It's a nice contrast and I really like that in my sausage gravy. Once your sausage is cooked, we're gonna add in 50 grams of all-purpose flour. Feel free to adjust the amount of fat that you've got in the pan here. If you need more, go ahead and add in a little bit of butter. If you need less, go ahead and spoon a little bit out. I've had to do both depending on how much butter and how much fat is in my pork, so it really just depends on you and depends on the day. You pretty much want an equal amount of fat to flour here. We're gonna cook this for a few minutes just so that the flour isn't raw anymore. It's gonna be a little bit darker. We're not making a roux for gumbo though, so don't cook this until it's like dark roux. You just need a little bit of color, basically a blonde roux here. Add in 500 grams of milk slowly while mixing just to ensure that there are no lumps. We're gonna let this come up to a simmer and just bubble away for a few minutes. The texture of this is super, super easy to adjust with more milk as needed or more cooking as needed. So just go for a ballpark estimate and then adjust the texture to what you like. Seasoning wise, we've already made our own sausage, so this really only needs salt, pepper, and I really, really like hot sauce in my sausage gravy. You don't have to, it's something that adds a little bit more acidity and heat. If you're not into that at all, just leave it out. Go with a ton of black pepper. I think that's the most important thing here. I wanna see specks of black pepper all throughout the gravy. I think if you're not doing that, your sausage gravy isn't right. I don't want like a really, really light white colored gravy. I want little bits of pepper all throughout it. Taste this for final seasoning and let it sit on the stove to stay warm while we check on those biscuits. Mine are done at right about the 27-minute mark. They're gonna be lightly browned on top and really nice and brown on the bottom. Mawmaw always keeps around a little like spreadable container of butter and just hits each one with butter as they come out of the oven. Totally forgot to do that today. I don't know why. I've done that every time I've made them since. Something just like slipped my mind, but I think butter is really, really good just kind of so it melts in, gets into all the cracks and crispy bits on the top. I think a required rite of passage in the biscuit making process is while they're still warm, sneaking one from the tray, putting on a big slab of butter and a smear of jam or jelly of your preference and just eating it like a sandwich. It is straight up just one of the most delicious things you're ever gonna eat. It's got the textural contrast of the crunchy exterior, the flaky, tender interior. You're getting tartness and sweetness from the jam. You're getting that butter. You have to make it, like just straight up, you have to do it. To serve this, I'm gonna quickly fry an egg in some butter. So get a small nonstick pan over medium and add in a knob of butter. Once it's hot, you should start to see a little bit of foaming on the butter. Crack your egg into the foaming butter and let it fry on the first side for a minute or two until the whites are just looking slightly set. Season this with salt and pepper and then flip it and cook on the other side for another minute. I want the whites to be cooked while the yolks stay runny. This is kind of exactly what you want it to be from Waffle House. To serve it, you're gonna crack a biscuit open and spoon on some of the gravy. Place the egg on top. I think green onion looks really nice on this, not a requirement. I think hot sauce is really delicious on this, not a requirement. For me, my favorite breakfasts are savory, like bowls or plates where everything can be combined into your own beautiful bites. And this biscuits and gravy absolutely hits that note. You just get to like cut through it, you get the tender biscuit, you get that crunchy, crunchy bottom. You've gotta make this. If you're into Southern breakfasts at all, I think this is absolutely, without a doubt, one of the best around. Mawmaw makes the best biscuits, and I think you should learn how to do it for your family too. Massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. They get some cool benefits for supporting the channel, so check it out if you're interested. I recently put out a video with some mind-blowing technique on how to get smoky chicken that tastes like it's been cooked on a grill inside in the oven, so check that out. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.